I have seen so many posts on Facebook about chicken and noodles, and everybody seems to love it. But I didn't even know what it was. I know what chicken noodle soup is, and I'm like, what is chicken and noodles? Just a thicker version? So anyway, I had to make it because everybody was raving about it, and I decided to go old school with this. So I have made my own noodles that I'm gonna use in this recipe, starting off with a whole chicken, and the only thing we're gonna change up from the old school way is we're gonna use a new school pressure cooker. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Today's recipe might seem a little bit complicated, or you may think it's really labor intensive or takes a really long time because it's old-fashioned chicken and noodles, the kind that would cook on the stove all day long. But we're gonna speed up the process with a pressure cooker. I'm using the 6.5 quart Ninja Foodie, but you can use any pressure cooker that you want as long as it's big enough to hold the whole chicken, which I'm choosing to use. You don't have to. You could use chicken thighs or bone-in, skin-on chicken breast, whatever you like. But it's just as easy to use the whole chicken, and you get an amazing broth to make your chicken and noodles from. I'm also using some homemade noodles that I made, which are amazing, and I will definitely link to the video how to make those below this video. All right, so let's get right into it because it's super easy, okay? We're gonna have our inner pot in the Ninja Foodie or your pressure cooker. We're gonna put in 4 cups of water. And I know some people are gonna say, well, what about if I use chicken stock? Will that even bring more flavor into it? You don't need to, because we're using a whole chicken. We're gonna make the stock right now as we cook the chicken. Now, if you wanted to make a different version of this with already cooked chicken, then I would probably start off with chicken stock, and I'll give you all those directions on my written recipe on my website, thesaltedpepper.com. But for this version, we're gonna start off with a whole chicken. And to make it a little bit easier to get out of the pot after it cooks, I recommend using some sort of a sling. You can use a rack in the low position if the rack allows enough clearance for your chicken. I ran into some issues with my 5.5 pound chicken in the 6.5 quart where it was just, especially with this one lid model, and it was just sitting too close to the heating element. Although that's not engaged during pressure cooking, I still didn't want it up that close. So the sling worked really well to get it all the way down in the bottom of the pot. Now, the other thing that you'll find in a whole chicken is usually there's either a bag that has the neck and some other parts. We usually discard those if you're making a roasted chicken, but we want to make stock, so we are going to use those. So I'm putting those right in with the rest of our stock ingredients. So just grab them out, whatever's in that cavity. Now, technically, you could leave them in if you wanted to, but I like them to be floating in the water because it really adds a ton of flavor. Now, if you're totally opposed to that, then you can throw them away, but I like to use them. All right, that's it. That's all we need to do. You don't need to season or salt or anything else. Everything else will be done right in the pot of water. So then pick your chicken up, put it on your little sling, lower it in. Now these actually have a little clip, so that's what I'm gonna use. Just like that. And then we're gonna get the rest of these ingredients into the pot along with it. I have 2 stalks of celery, or almost 2 stalks. This was the very inside that I don't have a plan for, and it was getting a little soft, so this is a perfect use for it. But 2 stalks of celery is what you need, just push those down. 2 carrots, which this is 1 carrot broken in half. I have another one down there. Of course, your little chicken pieces. And I don't know why I went into the chicken with the tongs and then go into this with my hands. I'm gonna wash my hands anyway, it doesn't matter. All right, so go push that down in there. Now, what I like to do is take the stems off of some parsley and put those in for flavor as well. I use the parsley at the end of this dish, so I'm using all of the parsley then. If you're not gonna use parsley, then just skip this part, it's fine. Now, possibly, I should have put all this in and then the chicken on top, right? Probably would have been a little bit better. So let's go ahead. Let's just grab this out. It's gonna be a little bit easier for you guys too, to do it that way. Then we're gonna put in an onion that I just peeled and cut in half. You honestly don't even have to peel it. So put those all on the bottom. Now, our seasoning blend. 1 tablespoon of fine grind sea salt or kosher salt. Yes, 1 tablespoon. You're going to need it to season the meat and everything up, okay? 1 teaspoon of black pepper, that's optional, you don't have to use that. 1 teaspoon of onion powder, again, optional, but it adds a nice flavor. And 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Let's put that in just like that. All right, let me clean up here and then we will get under pressure. We only have to go under pressure for 15 minutes, so it is not a long process. Now on this model, it's the 1 lid Ninja Foodi. So I pressure cook and air fry with this, but whatever lid you use for pressure cooking, you're gonna put that on. On this model, we go all the way over to the left to pressure cook. Turn the Ninja Foodi on. It will default to pressure cook because that's the only function that's over there. And high is what we want, and we're gonna go for 15 minutes. And hit start. Make sure your valve is in the seal position. That's very important. And then it'll take a little bit of time for the pot to go under pressure because we have 4 cups of water in there. Once it goes under pressure, we'll pressure cook for the 15 minutes. And then I just let it do a natural release, okay? That really helps to infuse the flavors more, and it makes it a lot easier to handle the chicken afterwards, and you don't have to worry about super scalding hot liquid, okay? So full natural release takes about 13 minutes or so based on my test recipes. So you can plan on this taking around 30 minutes. So what I like to do is use this time to prep up the vegetables that I'm gonna add to the chicken and noodles after the chicken is done. And that is about 1 cup of celery, which is about 2 to 3 stalks, just depending on their size. Obviously mine are a little short, so I'm gonna have 3. 1 to 2 carrots of this size. If they're smaller, you might need 3 to make a cup. And then 1 small onion or a half of a large onion usually to make a cup. Keep in mind that this is the only part that we use pressure cooking for, okay? We will saute the vegetables after the chicken is done, and we saute them in a little bit of butter, and then we create a semi-roux, I guess you'd call it, with some flour. Then we pour back in the chicken stock. So you want the vegetables to be cut small enough for them to cook most of the way during the saute. We will bring it back to a boil, and you can simmer it for a while or boil it for a little bit to get them tenderized, but you don't want like really huge chunks. That's what I'm getting at, okay? That was a long way around the block to tell you, cut them smaller rather than bigger, okay? Now the way that I slice them is I like to kind of just slice the celery into about 1/2 inch slice, the carrots into coins, and then I dice up the onion in about 1/2 inch dice. All right, so the pin has dropped down. Now, one thing I will say is that if you're using the OL series, go ahead and vent. Sometimes even though the pin drops, there's still a little bit of steam, and it says open, but really you couldn't open it because there's just a little bit of steam in there. So just flip it to vent, let the rest out, and then we'll open the lid. All right, now you want to remove your chicken. You could do that directly on your cutting board to allow it to cool, or you could do what I do and put it in a bowl. I just do that so I can move it out of the way in case I'm making something else. I'm just gonna lift this up. I also tip it to get any liquid from inside the cavity that I can out. Put that right there. All right, so once the chicken is on your cutting board or into a bowl like this, you're gonna let it cool, and it's gonna take a good 30 minutes to cool down, okay? And that's just gonna make it easier for you to shred the meat. Now, if you wanna use 2 forks and do it while it's still warm, it's not gonna hurt anything, but I just find it a lot easier to do it with my hands once it's cooled down. All right, so now for the stock. We're gonna get that out of the pot so that we can wash up the pot before we move on to making the actual chicken and noodles. So you can do this a couple different ways, all right? You can simply pour it in and hope it doesn't splash all over you, or you could do what I do and use a ladle. This smells simply amazing. So I get it really close and then I just pick up. And what we're doing is we're straining out all of those vegetables and the parsley stems because we don't want that in our final dish. We want to get those out. They did their job already. They flavored this amazing stock. You should end up with 6 cups of this delicious chicken stock. All right, when I get down to about this far and I've already got most of the vegetables in there, then I just pick it up, and pour it the rest of the way in. If for some reason you don't end up with 6 cups, add some water, okay, to this. You need 6 cups of stock to make the chicken and noodles. Looks like I'm a little shy this time, which is interesting because I've made this recipe, oh my gosh, 4 times already while I was testing it. And every single time the chicken gave me 6 cups of stock. 4 cups of water went in, 6 cups of stock came out. Except for this time, of course, because I'm doing a video. But that's okay, because it might happen to you. And I'm just gonna add in a cup of water, that's all. It's gonna be perfectly fine. All right, so that is all done. And now we just wait a few minutes. I'm gonna clean the pot, wait for the chicken to cool, and then we will get everything into the pot. From here on out, it is quick and easy, and oh my gosh, the results are so worth it. All right, there we go. 6 full cups of liquid, and I'm gonna set those over to the side and kind of move a few things around because we're gonna get the Ninja Foodi or your pressure cooker, or you could do this in a pot on the stove as well. We're gonna turn it on. Defaults to sear saute on high, that's what we want, so I'm gonna hit start. Now I'm gonna add in 4 tablespoons of butter, my onions that I diced up earlier, cup of carrots that I sliced up, cup of celery, and then just a little bit of salt and pepper, 1 teaspoon of fine ground sea salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper, just season those up. We're gonna let the butter melt, saute the vegetables while we shred the chicken and get it off the bone so we can add it back in. What I like to do basically is take the skin off because we don't need that. And it's up to you if you want to use the whole chicken or if you wanted to, maybe use one of the chicken breasts for chicken salad. Really, it's totally up to you. It does not make any difference. Then I just go right down the breastbone, remove the chicken breast, and then there's that really sought after chicken tender, which is right here. Just lay it on the cutting board. This is what I think. It's a lot easier to do this after you let it cool like I did, because it's so much easier to get everything off the bone without getting any of the other stuff that you don't want in your chicken and noodles. And then you can save the bones for a bone broth. And I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna save the bones, save the carcass and the skin, and freeze them until maybe I do another whole chicken, and then I will make some bone broth with the 2 of them. Butter's melting. Just give this a stir. You want to saute your vegetables until they are pretty close to done the way you want to eat them, because we don't go back under pressure like I said earlier in the video. From here on out, it's just a sear saute to get the liquid back to boiling and then do our noodles. So I let them go a good 10 minutes, okay? But it takes about that long just to get your chicken ready. And now I'll go back and get some more of that meat off. But the next step that I like to do, you can do this any way you want to, is I just turn it over and I just pull off, and then with your fingers just go through, because I put the whole thing in there. And anything you don't want to add into your chicken and noodles, just put in your bowl to do with what you want later. All right, now that it's turned over, I'm gonna remove the skin on the back. There is some meat on the back here that I like to use. Not a lot, but it's there and I'm gonna use it. Now I don't put the chicken in the pot yet, so don't simply pull it off and throw it in the pot, because we really need to get those noodles cooked, and they're gonna cook a lot easier if it's just in the broth with these little bit of vegetables at the bottom. All right, so I'm almost done. The vegetables look great. It's been about 10 minutes. That's all you need to do. Now we're gonna add in 3 tablespoons of flour, just sprinkle it right over top. That is gonna help thicken the chicken and noodles. It's probably one of the main differences between chicken noodle soup and chicken and noodles is that it's a much thicker, kind of like a stew, but it's, you know, it's even noodlier, you know, obviously than even if you put noodles in a stew. It's just, I don't know. It really is a fantastic dish. So if you've never made it before, definitely give it a try. All right, we just need to cook the flour for about 2 to 3 minutes, if that, okay? So we just wanna get that flour taste kind of sauteed out. And then we will put in our chicken stock, our homemade chicken broth, really, and let it come to a boil, and then we'll get these delicious homemade egg noodles in to cook. All right, there we go. Now it's not gonna thicken up to the point where like we can't do our noodles in this, so don't worry about that, but it will give that extra thickness. And the noodles also help to thicken it. So if you're looking at it now and saying, that doesn't look like chicken and noodles, just wait, it will. Oh my gosh, it smells amazing. All right, I wanna bring that to a full boil, which is already starting because the stock was still, or broth, was still really hot. So in just about a minute, I'm gonna throw in some of these noodles. But I wanted to talk real quick about what you can use if you don't wanna use or make your own homemade ones like I did. You can get these in the dry section, noodle section of the store, where these are just an Amish style egg noodle. You could use the other traditional egg noodles that we all know. I mean, that's fine because we're not going under pressure. You don't have to worry about timing. You are gonna cook this until they're done. Now, one very interesting thing that I found out while I was testing the recipe, because I tested it both with a pound, which this is, of these, you know, homemade noodles, and a half of a pound or 8 ounces of the dry. You do not need to add any liquid for either one. So either one will work with this recipe. So you can put in 8 ounces of dry noodles and let them cook and it's gonna be fine. And you can put in a pound of your fresh noodles and it'll be fine. Now, a pound of fresh noodles is pretty much equal to the same volume of 8 ounces because of the drying process. So it's about the same amount of noodles, but you want it nice and noodly. Now, these stretched out because I made them for a previous video and I've kind of left them here. I should have put them on a flat tray. So really the way that I normally make them is that they are about, let's see, maybe about this long, maybe a little longer, but they're not like kind of stretched out, but they're gonna work fine. Now I'm gonna put them in about a handful at a time. And then give them a little stir. Okay, we don't want them to cook in a clump. We want them to make, you know, be separated when they cook. The best way to tell when they're done is by tasting one, okay? But usually it's gonna take somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes for them to cook. And the same with the dry noodles. I found that they took about 10 minutes to cook. Oops. Once I stir the first batch, then I put another, you know, handful in, but I kind of like go like that, okay? All right, so that's a pound of the homemade noodles, 8 ounces of dry. Usually it's egg noodles that you use in this dish. You can see how it's nicely starting to thicken, but we are nowhere near the thickness that we want. But now we can add back in the chicken while the noodles finish cooking. You can use a knife and chop it up. You could do it however you want. I keep it kind of rustic, and so I just put in those littler ones. If it's a bigger piece, I want to break it up. I just break it up with my hands and throw it in there. I'm using both the dark and the white meat. You can just use all the white meat or all the dark meat. It really doesn't matter. Give a stir every once in a while just to make sure we're not scorching anything on the bottom, but everything looks really good. Now we've got 2 finishing touches after I put in the rest of this chicken. And then we're just gonna let it sit for about 5 minutes and we will be all done with our chicken and noodles. All right, now I'm gonna pull out one of these noodles to just make sure it's done, but I am sure, I can tell by looking at them that they are done. There we go. All right, let's give it a taste. Perfect. I like mine a little on the toothsome side, so a little bit chewy, like al dente spaghetti kind of thing. But if you like your softer, just boil a little bit longer. You're not gonna do any harm if you keep it going. But for me, I am done with that, so I wanna take my temperature down to about 2. We'll let it sit for a minute. I'm gonna add in those final touches, and then we will let it thicken and cool down a little bit before serving. All right, now we are gonna add in a 1/2 cup of cream. You don't have to add in the cream, but it's going to lighten everything up, make it look a little more appealing, and it's delicious that way. So stir this in. Look how thick we're getting now. Now, some people like to put peas in their chicken and noodles. You can absolutely do that. That is no problem. In fact, if I was making this just for myself, I probably would. But since it's a recipe, I just decided to leave it plain and not put those in, but you certainly can. Now, it looks kind of boring. You know, there's not a whole lot of pop of green, so I'm gonna fix that with parsley. Remember, we used the parsley stems in the stock. Now I'm gonna use the leaves, which is about a cup of just loosely packed parsley. So, and you know, you don't have to use it all. You can use more, use less, whatever you want. It's okay. The other thing that would be good if you wanted to is add in some green onions. It would change the flavor a little bit, but it would be perfectly fine. But I like to just add in a good handful of parsley and stir it in right at the end, okay? And look at that. That just brings it totally alive, doesn't it? Oh my gosh. It's simply amazing. All right, now it's got to sit. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off right now. It's going to sit. I'm going to grab a plate and we're going to get to tasting it. Oh my gosh, look at that. Oh, it's so delicious. I already know because I've already made it a ton of times. And it is like comfort food on a plate, let me tell you. Look at all this chicken and all these delicious noodles. Oh my gosh. So, so good. Oh my goodness. If you haven't had chicken and noodles before, I don't even know how to describe this, but it's like all the best things about chicken noodle soup, but better somehow. It's just better. The chicken is so tender, so flavorful. Oh my gosh, let's see how the vegetables are cooked. This is a 10, 10, 10. I'm telling you, like everything comes together. The textures, the flavors, it's just all so perfect. I absolutely love this recipe and I know you will too. If you haven't made homemade noodles before, give it a try. It doesn't take that long. They're really easy to make. And usually I make them in between the time that the chicken is pressure cooking and cooling. So it really does not take that much longer to make them from scratch. And you can tell the difference. They are so, so delicious. And I'll link to that recipe right over there so you can watch it.